Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Wednesday, May 26th, 2021, and today we're going to be talking about the January 6th commission that just passed in the United States House of Representatives that is on the way to the United States Senate for consideration and for an eventual vote. On your screen right now, we have every single Senate seat that is in the United States, and I'm going to be telling you which states and which senators in particular support or do not support or have not responded or given us a determination as to how they are going to vote when the January 6th commission does get to the Senate floor for an official vote. So we're going to go through it pretty quickly, and then we're going to discuss the implications of what this January 6th commission actually would do. And I'm sure that you can sort of understand based off of the title of the video or just based off of what I've been discussing so far. But long story short, the commission would establish an independent investigation into the start of the January 6th riots at the Capitol, looking at the insurrection, looking at everything that happened, and understanding and putting not necessarily the blame, but getting a better understanding of the situation that happened, how this came to be, what rhetoric, what politicians in particular caused this to occur, why were there people cowering in the Capitol during a very, very important vote. What drove people to go to the Capitol and break through the windows? What drove the first attack on the Capitol in over 200 years? Many things are being considered, and that's why there is supposed to be an independent commission, not a Democratic-led one. So this is largely viewed as something that is bipartisan by many Republicans, but not necessarily all of them. It actually just passed in the House with 252 votes, if I remember correctly. Yes, 252 to 175, which means 35 Republicans decided, I'm voting to get this January 6th commission. Now it's moving on to the Senate, which is a little bit trickier because you might think, oh, because Democrats have the majority in the Senate, they will easily get this passed, but it needs more than a majority. Because of the filibuster, it requires 60 votes to end that filibuster, and Democrats can technically get there, as you will see as we start characterizing these states, but it is a little bit trickier. So I'm going to characterize all of the states with Democratic senators as states where we are seeing both senators back this bill. And that's true. Every single Democrat is on board with this. There's not a single Democrat who's under consideration here who's saying, maybe I don't want to go ahead and follow through with this. You know, every single Democrat is on board, which actually is a pretty good thing, I would say, for the Democratic Party to be in collaboration on this very important issue to the American public. And I think that looking at the states, you know, you're not really surprised to see California and New York in agreement on this, but there are zero Democrats who are even, you know, questioning their support for the January 6th commission. Every single one of them is on board, which I think is a very good look for the Democrats if they're looking at it in its entirety. You know, this is something they are unified on. Even Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema, even though they do like to be different and try to appease independents and Republicans, as we've seen from the House vote, some Republicans are on board and many independents are as well. So we start out with 50 senators who support the January 6th commission, but they are not the only ones. We currently are at 52, and in order for this to pass, it needs 60. But the do not support is not at 48. It's not at even 40. You know, there are a handful of senators who have not responded or have not told us how they are going to vote, who are iffy about the situation. Yes, there are a number of Republicans who are vehemently opposed to it, but the Democrats still have a pathway to 60. And it starts with Mitt Romney in Utah and Lisa Murkowski in the state of Alaska. Now, those two shouldn't come as a surprise. Both of them voted to convict President Trump when it came down to the Senate vote on impeachment. Previously, they had not voted to convict. Mitt Romney did on one account in 2019, or 2020 actually, but the 2019 impeachment. But both of these two, you know, have had history where they have voted to acquit President Trump in the past. Now they are saying convict him. They said convict him. They said that he was responsible for everything that occurred. So them backing the January 6th commission, I think they largely view as an effort that will expose President Trump or Republicans just like him, who encouraged the insurrection that, you know, threatened the lives of many senators, representatives, and public officials and took the life of a Capitol police officer. So Mitt Romney, Lisa Murkowski, I'm not surprised. The one person who does throw me for a little bit of a loop is Richard Burr from the state of North Carolina. Now, the reason why he surprises me just a little bit is because he is someone who voted to convict President Trump in the impeachment vote or in the whether or not to convict or acquit. So he is actually, you know, one of the ones who has been opposed to this situation, and it's actually quite interesting. Now, I'm actually going to go ahead and characterize all of the states where we have an unknown answer or a senator who is considering it. I'll start with the considering and just pay attention because they are going to be the same color by the end of the video. So, those considering it, we have Shelley Moore Capito in the state of West Virginia. She's under consideration in the January 6th commission. Bill Cassidy, someone who voted to convict President Trump, under consideration in that state as well. Then you have Susan Collins in the state of Maine, under consideration for her vote as well. Mike Crapo in the state of Idaho, under consideration there. What I'm going to do at the end of this is actually take the states with consideration and make that the primary color. So, for instance, I'm going to go ahead and flip over Maine and West Virginia, just because that blue is taking up a significant portion of the map. Let's keep going. We have Morin in Kansas, Jerry Morin. Then we have Rob Portman in the state of Ohio. So that is another consideration, a Republican. All of these considering are Republicans. None of these are Democrats. We have Ben Sasse in the state of Nebraska. We have John Thune in the state of South Dakota, a top Republican official in the state. We have Pat Toomey in Pennsylvania. And we also have Roger Wicker in the state of Mississippi. So that puts us in a position where we are looking at 10 Republicans who are saying, I am considering voting for this bill. Right now, all Democrats need is 8. Lisa Murkowski actually announced today that she was going to back the January 6th commission. So we had 51 with Romney. Now we're at 52, which is why, this is pretty recent. It wouldn't necessarily be as updated. Actually, I don't think it was announced today, but the media started to cover it a little bit more because she did announce before today that she was going to back this. But we're at 10 right now amongst those who are unknown/considering, and the unknown actually goes a little bit further, around 10 more. Actually, it might be exactly 10 more or 9 more. Let's see when we get there. So we have Tennessee, Marsha Blackburn, recently elected back in 2018. She hasn't really given a response. Also, one thing that I do want to say, keep in mind there is a difference between considering and unknown. Many of these Republicans who are unknown currently are going to be completely against it over the next few days. But there is some possibility that they do change their minds, and right now the Democrats are going to try to reach out to anyone and everyone who hasn't given a negative response to the January 6th commission. You have Deb Fischer in the state of Nebraska, solidifying that state as 2 senators who are under consideration. You have Texas, or unknown. You have Texas with Ted Cruz. I'm surprised that's just, a yellow state here. It's probably going to be red over the next couple of days. Looking at Cindy Hyde-Smith, you have Mississippi, along with Roger Wicker. You have Jim Inhofe in the state of Oklahoma, Mike Lee in Utah. You have Roger Marshall in the state of Kansas, solidifying that state as well. You have Jim Risch in the state of Idaho, solidifying Idaho as well. Tim Scott in South Carolina, and Dan Sullivan in the state of Alaska. So I'm going to characterize both of those states back with the blue. And then for the rest of the states, I'm sure you can assume, these are all no votes. These are all Republicans who are saying, you know what, I'm not backing this January 6th commission. I don't believe that it's right for this January 6th commission to be voted on or for it to be under consideration. Many of these Republicans don't even agree that the insurrection was an insurrection. Many of them call it a peaceful protest and say that the peaceful protests on the Black Lives Matter movement were riots and, not insurrections, but they will say the word riot and just fail to recognize what's happening and what happened in Washington, D.C. Because they were very quick to try to condemn many peaceful protests during May, June, July, August, very quick. But as soon as it happens right in Washington, D.C., by their own supporters, the narrative begins to change. And it's not even as if the situations are comparable. You're talking about a movement that was and still is founded on racial equity and equal protection under the law versus an insurrection geared at overturning a free and fair election. The two are not comparable. I mean, you're looking at a situation that you really can't try to compare apples and oranges in this case. And for some Republican senators to try to pivot it towards that, for example, you have the senator close to retiring, what's his name, Ron Johnson in the state of Wisconsin. You have him who said, I might have been less comfortable, or I would have been less comfortable had there been Black Lives Matter supporters in the Capitol rather than the insurrectionists. I mean, I find that quite appalling that he would say something, so clearly rooted in prejudice. And in addition, that was the stance of many of these senators that, if he was just saying the quiet part out loud, many of these senators do believe the same way. And many of them in yellow also believe. But that doesn't necessarily mean that all 20 of them believe that the insurrection didn't hurt anybody. I think that for some of these Republicans, they look at it and say, I don't necessarily disagree with the fact that the election should be overturned, given that some of them have been pretty outspoken about their support of President Trump even after the election. But the way that it was gone about, the storming of the Capitol, is what I think is really riveting up a lot of these Republicans. The only Republican who voted to convict President Trump and is against the January 6th commission is Richard Burr. And he might be trying to leave on a little bit of a higher note than the senator who voted to convict President Trump in his retiring 2 years, in his really, the end of his Senate career. So for some of these Republicans, they might be at odds with themselves and their constituents because they know and they experienced the worst of it. They were forced to go underground. They went from the morning of President Trump speaking to these voters, where there were thousands of people, gathered in front of the Capitol, for President Trump to say, let's walk down Pennsylvania Avenue. Let's get, you have Rudy Giuliani saying trial by combat. You have all this time, you have Madison Cawthorn tweeting out, this is the day that it all happens. All of this seemed to really inspire this base of thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people that went to the Capitol. I don't think the intention originally started out to storm the Capitol, but I do think that mob rule goes above all. And when you have all of these, Republicans, and you have all of these Trump supporters here together saying, I now am in a position where I will storm if everyone else is storming, if I'm breaking into the Capitol, everyone else is. Looking at some of this horrible nature of what happened at the Capitol, it's honestly quite sickening to even think about. I remember going live on the day of the insurrection because for me, I don't know if all of you guys know this, but I live on the outskirts of Washington, D.C. I'm a 30-minute car ride away, and I live 10 minutes from the closest metro stop. So I go to Washington, D.C. very often. 2 weeks before the insurrection, I have a picture of myself in front of the Christmas tree at the Capitol building. I walked up those steps and took a picture of myself, right there in December of 2020. Not even 2 weeks later, a barricade goes up, and people still aren't allowed to get that close. The impact of this insurrection is unfathomable, and it's honestly quite upsetting. Because for me, and I'm not going to call myself a DC native because I'm not, I'm a Maryland native, but for someone who lives on the outskirts, I was extremely worried. When I had family members calling my house and saying, are you okay? I live in Prince George's County. It's not as if I live in, Ocean City or Cecil County, in some part of Maryland that's further disconnected from Washington, D.C. No, much of what I do and much of where me and my friends end up going, it's to Washington, D.C. because it's the closest thing there and it's very fun. What happened in Washington, D.C. didn't just impact me. I had friends who were calling their parents. One of my friends actually from school, her dad worked in the Capitol on this day, and he was with the representatives and the senators, with the gas masks and all, cowering and fearful for their lives in the Capitol building. In a nation that is founded on democracy, and in a nation that's founded on us, working together and being bipartisan, you very much had this situation where a free and fair election was trying to be forcibly overturned by insurrectionists at the Capitol. And think about how scary that must have been. When you saw those insurrectionists with zip ties, when you saw them bring a guillotine to the Capitol, what do you think is going to happen? So for many of these Republicans, that's what I think the mindset is. While they represent Republican states such as Nebraska and South Dakota and West Virginia, and when you have some of these Republicans who are saying that I'm actually considering voting for it and leaning voting for it, you have Bill Cassidy from Louisiana. He was recently elected. He doesn't necessarily have to worry about his constituents firing back on him until 2026 or 2024, somewhere around there. But looking at what happens in Louisiana we know that Louisiana is a very solid Republican state, but that really doesn't matter for some of these Republicans because even though they are Republican states, a January 6th commission is not meant to be a partisan vote. That's why 250 people voted for it in the House, with Democrats only have 222 seats. That's why 35 Republicans crossed over and said, I'm going to back the January 6th commission, because they knew in their hearts, and they knew based off experience, that that's something that needed to be investigated. And it's not even as if, Nancy Pelosi is leading the effort. You're talking about a truly independent and nonpartisan commission that will get to the root of the problem. But for 28 of these senators, all Republicans, they're saying that that's partisan. That's too far. They don't want to look at something that was truly detrimental to American democracy, a stain on the American legacy, if I was to put it lightly. The impact this had, not only on the national level, but on the international level, it made us look like fools. It made the American public look horrifying, that we couldn't understand that an election held freely and fairly to a point where people were storming the Capitol. And now you are seeing, the mother of the Capitol police officer, Brian Sicknick, asking for these GOP senators to back the commission. All this is an independent commission, an investigation into what happened. But 28 are already saying no. I expect 9 out of the 10 or 10 out of the 10 of the additional I don't know or haven't given a response to not back it as well. Democrats need 60, and they can get there, but it's still going to be difficult. Right now, there are 4 senators who voted to convict President Trump that are at odds about this, January 6th commission. I think that all 4 of them might eventually come around, but that only brings Democrats to 56. They already lost 1 to the no votes. That means they're going to need an additional 4 senators. Can they get it? Possibly. Some of these senators are waiting for revisions and changes to the January 6th commission before they vote yes on it. And if they can work well together, if you can see, Chuck Schumer meeting with some of these Republicans, maybe it's around the corner. It's going to be more difficult to pass this in the Senate than it was in the House because the House required a simple majority. Otherwise, this would have been a done deal and Democrats would have done it already. But because of this filibuster, it can't happen yet. But all in all, 52 senators say they support it, 28 say they don't, with 20 who haven't given a response or are considering backing it. Equally split at that. 10 haven't given a response, and 10 say they are considering it. Given the very severe nature of the insurrection, we will likely see, more and more of a push from top Democrats for this January 6th commission. Looking at the numbers, it is going to be tricky, and it's going to take a lot of convincing and a lot of bipartisan effort. But that's exactly what the January 6th commission is supposed to be. It's supposed to be an independent commission where both parties agree on one thing, that what happened at the Capitol was very bad for Americans, was very bad for the American public, was very bad for Capitol history. And that's why we might see some of these Republicans and why we are seeing some of these Republicans at odds, even though the majority of the party is saying don't do it, even though Mitch McConnell is saying don't do it, 20 of them still haven't given a response for a reason. And we will see, and I will update you guys as the numbers start to pour in, as the statements start to get released from the offices of these senators. So, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 midterm election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.